So how many of you have issues? Go ahead, fess up. Raise them high and proud. All right. So how many of you have subscriptions to your issues? They're not single issues, they're subscriptions, full-blown subscriptions. Yeah, I used to love that joke, and until I looked at my own subscriptions. But you know, the sort of do-gooder advice around that is cancel your subscription, right? And that is such a minimal piece of the whole puzzle, right? For any of us to tell someone to get over it. How many of you have been told to get over it before, right? And I will say that there is a time and place for a get over it conversation, but at the same time, here's what I really want you to hear me say. You can't really cancel an issue. You can't really get over anything because it's a memory. And unless you and I have complete and total amnesia, then all of the activity, everything that has happened to us, or we could even say for us, is embedded subconsciously, subjectively, in that realm of memory. So hear me when I say that it's actually not accurate to just cancel something. And you've probably heard me say this before too, that when people say, oh, they finally have closure, I don't actually believe in closure. I believe that what happens is that we move into a different state of development or awareness where we look at the situation with fresh perspective. That's evolution, that's growth. But the thing is still there. You don't wipe out the complete thing or the trauma of what happened in your family or what happened to you. You don't wipe that out. As we grow spiritually, as we evolve, as we consider that even in the midst of all of that, there was this thing called divine order. Even if we still struggle with that, but we're willing to consider it, then we start to chip away at the stagnation of the story. Meaning the story then is not set in stone, but it's slowly then being chipped away and maybe being transmogrified. Somebody challenged me on my, I put too many R's in it. Transmogrified into a new expression. That's my new word for the day. Get ready. So that it metamorphosizes, it transforms into something new, but it doesn't completely go away. Does that make sense? And so I think we do ourselves a disservice when we judge ourselves for not getting over something, rather than looking at that something and going, okay, I'm willing to ask a better question. Not why did it happen to me, but why did it happen for me? And in the re-questioning of that, in the reframing of that, we set the course for an entirely different perspective of experience. So I grew up in a fundamentalist Christian background, and they always said this statement: today is the day that the Lord hath made. So that was the declarative part, and then it was followed by an affirmative part, which is, and I will rejoice and be glad in it. You went to my church. Well, I remember you. I remember that casserole. Right, okay. Today is the day that the Lord hath made, and I will rejoice and be glad in it. And there was even a song. I mean, we sang that song in children's department. This is the day. Oh, okay, I won't go there. So when we migrate into a deeper exploration of spirituality, and we come upon a metaphysical perspective, we always understand then through the Aramaic description of words that the word Lord is translated into law. This teaching is really fundamentally based upon the understanding of law. Law as cause and effect, law as creative thought. Thought is creative. All of our thoughts are creative, and they go to produce effect. So if we don't like our lives, we change our thoughts. Thus we change our effects. So if you change that this is the day that the Lord hath made to this is the day that the law hath made. Stop for a moment. The day that the trauma happened to you was the day that the law hath made. The day that genocide took place on our planet, which happens pretty much every day, is the day that the law hath made. The day that you had your victory, the day that you gave birth to your child, the day that you got married, the day that you experienced complete and utter joy was the day that the law hath made. The day that you were abandoned, the day that you experienced an illness or got a diagnosis, was the day that the law hath made. Stop and think about that. So when we say, this is the worst day ever, it's still the day that the law hath made. And it's a sobering spiritual maturity when we understand then that the day is not influenced by world effects, but that the day is influenced by thought and knowledge of thought. I in no way then would tell somebody who said this is the worst day ever to get over it, because this is the day that the law had made. But I would begin to understand as I reflected upon the world events and the way things hurt our hearts, that there is still, simultaneously, as hard as it is to accept, that there is a continuance of divine order. And that divine order is the mainstay of all of life and existence. And so this day, the day in which the law is activated by my perception of it, is the day that I will get. That is not a judgment. That is not a judgment. Hear me when I say this isn't about, well, you need to learn to think better, because there are countries that think a certain way. And that collective thought produces the ongoing days of their experience. Not because they're bad, not because they're not doing it right, because they are a product of a generational conscious evolution and understanding. And to the degree of that awareness is the degree of the continuing experience. But what happens over time is that anything that isn't, if this is divine order, anything that is not in alignment with divine order will have to begin to dissolve. Anything that's not truth will crumble, because truth in and of itself is the only mainstay. So what begins to happen in civilizations, within people, within cultures, even within families, and even ourselves, when truth has been denied, is that things start to crumble and fall in order for the day that the law has made, which is divine order, to finally be seen. That's the bringing us to our knees. That's the humbling. That's the cosmic 2x4, which is now a 5x7, an 11x12. It just keeps growing, right? So it isn't about the day. It's never about out there, as noisy and seductive as it seems. But it is about the examination of our own ability to see order even in its apparent absence. So I was driving a lot this past week, and the word well-being came up, because we're striving for well-being within ourselves. And then I thought, well, well-being is equivalent to how well my being is. Well-being is being a well-being. And being a well-being is about understanding that I can't escape that divine order. I can't escape God. I can't escape intelligence. I can hide from it. I can deny it. I can argue against it. I can resist it. I can put it under a bushel, as the song says. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine, or I'm going to hide it under a bushel. I can do all of those things in a resistant energy, but it doesn't change the fact that this is the day that the law hath made. Now, the second part, the affirmative part is, I will rejoice and be glad in it. Ooh, that takes some work. That takes some work. And I'm realizing now that we're either assisting one another to do that work, or we are really trying to swim upstream with a lot of dead weight on ourselves. And so the nature of truth, or I like the word authenticity, the nature of that is that it must rise to the top. And this truth is exhibited in both the natural and the spiritual world. And it becomes our task, it becomes our mission to strive to be this truth in human form. And again, we've talked about this so often, is that when I straddle my humanity and my divinity, that in both sectors there is truth. And my whole mission then is about the integration of these two things. I don't want to deny my humanity. I don't want to be holier than thou. I want to embrace my humanity. What does that mean? Humanity has flaws. Humanity has imperfections. Humanity is messy. Humanity has memory. And sometimes in the humanity, the memory gets stagnant and the story never continues. The story stops, like the end of a book. But in the divinity, there is no end. There's no final chapter in that book. And so we're constantly writing the next chapter and the next chapter and the next chapter because it's evolutionary. Is it possible to integrate those two things? Is it possible for me to go, oh my God, I'm not what happened to me. That's a chapter. And so what happened to me, like any great story, is that that thing that happened then has the ability to prompt me or propel me to write the next chapter. And the next chapter is going to look something like this. It's either going to be filled with bitterness, perhaps even a little revenge, or it's going to be about transcendence. And the authorship of that chapter is entirely up to us. And so as we begin to look at this month about vulnerability, about emotion, about some of the messiness of that, our book this month is called Daring Greatly by one of the great researchers of vulnerability, Brene Brown. Yes, love us some Brene. Brene's for her first TED Talk, which was actually a local TEDx talk in Houston, became one of the most watched TED Talks on the main channel to be viewed. Millions and millions and millions. There's a really funny video about her after she gave her talk about vulnerability. She then said to a friend, I can't believe I got up and was vulnerable about vulnerability. And is there any way for me to sneak into that thing and erase the tape? Because 600 people were there, and she was afraid 700 more people would see it online. Tens of thousands of people have seen it, and which launched her career. So she knows her stuff about vulnerability. And she named the book Daring Greatly after Theodore Roosevelt's famous Man in the Arena speech. And the first line of that speech is about not adhering to critics, meaning that there will always be a critic. So you can't get a critic to go away. The critic will always be there. This is the day that the law hath made, that day will be filled with critics. Not because you did anything wrong, but because you can't You can't cancel any of that. You can't make life out there stop. Life out there will continue. It's how you then interpret and relate to that. It's how you relate to the critic. It's how you relate to the oppositional voice. It's how you relate to anything that is different than you believe in. And sometimes what you think you believe in, which is right, isn't necessarily right. It's understanding that our definition of morality is actually what we grew up in. And who's to say that your morality or my morality is actually right? Who's to say that my righteousness, meaning the way in which my mind determines what is right, is actually right? And so if I'm not willing then to be a part of the bridge building, of owning my unexpressed or unexplored bigotry, or my stalwart concretized morality, if I'm not willing to make bridges and be able to have dialogue with other people, then that story, that same story we talked about earlier, again, final. And what we are here to do is we are here to learn and unlearn. Unlearn the bigoted or the unexpressed or the unexamined stagnation that is within us, and to learn the ways and operations and cultures and attitudes of other people as well. And if we aren't willing to have those kinds of dialogues, if we're just so stalwart in the fact that this is the way that it is, that's the way wars get started. And so vulnerability in and of itself is an amazing thing because it requires us, or it invites us. It says, come into this arena that's uncomfortable. Thomas Troward, who is one of the most influential writers and lecturers of our founder, Ernest Holmes, he wrote this many, many, many years ago. He says, "We've never been out of our right path. You're always on the right path. Only we have been walking in it backwards instead of forwards." So you're on the right path because there's only one path, right? That path is life. And so I'm either walking forwards in life or I'm continuing to retreat backwards. And he says, and now that we have begun to follow the path in the right direction, we find that it is none other than the way of peace. Think about that. If I change my mind, the more accurate way to say it is I change my thinking, and my mind leads me in a different direction. When I change my thinking, I open the door for peace. When I change my thinking, I open an opportunity for true communication and joy to come back in. When I change my thoughts and my rigidity, I have the ability to be able to learn something that I didn't know before. He says, and this road to eternal life has a simplicity and a naturalness. It is because we are trying to be or do something which is not natural to us that we experience the weariness and the labor, where we should find all of our activities joyously concentrated by the force of the love that we have. But when we make the grand discovery of how to live naturally, we shall find it to be all and more than all, a perpetual joy to ourselves, and we shall radiate light and life wherever we go. Because wherever you go is the day that the law hath made. Wherever you go. And so, in Daring Greatly, in this book, Brene Brown said, maybe these are the three essentials. And the first essential is to tell the truth. Just tell the truth. What does that mean? Do you even know what the truth is? Or to tell the thing that you're afraid to tell. I know, again, over the last months, we kind of gave some credit to the Catholics because we said they had a good thing going on with that confession. In the AA programs about the moral inventory and giving voice to that there's something quite powerful about that. Because you're giving yourself a space to tell the truth. Unless you really wanted to impress a priest and you made up some great fantastical tale. But nonetheless, you're telling the truth, confession. This confession. And so to tell the truth simply means to begin to, first of all, become aware of the resistance that you have in that and why. Why are you and I resistant into telling the truth? Most of the time, it's because our main concern is what other people will think. And then that concern is that my well-being is dependent upon what other people think. Ooh, my well-being, what's going to happen to me, is dependent upon what other people think. No, it's not. Your well-being is dependent upon what you think. And in that thinking must be a congruency of understanding that divine order rules. Divine order doesn't then exempt any other person for the way that they think. Divine order envelops all because there's only one. And so to tell the truth simply means we have to begin to challenge some of the domestication and some of the practices that we have kept for ourselves around not telling the truth. How many of you were told that good little boys or good little girls behave a certain way? And if you stray from that, then either don't tell anyone or hide your behavior. Or you're going to have to migrate and go away to some other location where that kind of behavior is acceptable. I can see all of you have migrated here. Welcome to the congregation of renegades. Yeah. We've been told that success equals things, achievements, money, titles. That's what success is. When success is nothing more than right thinking. So I could possess nothing, but in my mind, if I'm walking the path forward, which simply means that I'm living and breathing and being in joy, then I'm a success. You are already a success today because you got dressed and you got here. Check, success. You ate something, perhaps, success. You got your kids up and dressed, success. Every single day has incremental pockets of success. But we're thinking that success has to look like this one thing. And if I don't achieve this one thing, then I'm just short of that. It's the perpetual carrot that is always being dangled in front of me. And to tell the truth means to say, I need to own the fact that I'm a success. To tell the truth means that censoring my feelings does not make me well behaved. Censoring my feelings will not garner me true, authentic friendship. Because if you're only going to be my friend if I act a certain way, then that's not friendship. Friendship is not trying to placate or fix it or do anything for somebody else, but it's just, here's that phrase, hold the space. Hold the space. And allow each of us to be able to have the experience and the feelings, again, as long as both parties understand that's not the end of the story. But I'm not going to say get over it. I'm going to lovingly be there, and I'm going to lovingly remind you that this too shall pass. It shall pass, but it'll still be a part of my memory. And so those who grieve, it's a very great thing in order to let people grieve. It's a great thing to let people have their process. As a child, when I grieved when my father died, only because it was a natural. I hadn't built up the resistance that's not good behavior. But I just remember my older sister Becky rocking me. I was like wailing. I was rocking me and saying, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. And you see that whole thing of don't cry, don't cry, don't cry is like a universal bombardment of us saying that it's not okay, it's not respectable for you to show your feelings. Cry. Snot it out. Penelope, sing another song. Feel what you need to feel. And, here's the kicker, the operative word is and. And. This is the day that the law hath made. It is a day like any other day. And life will continue. And so as I begin to tell the truth that I'm a big, paradoxical, messy, beautiful thing. Some days you might get this, some days you might get that. And one is not better than the other. And yes, I am a Gemini, but Geminis rule. All right, but illness is not weakness. Illness is not doing something spiritually wrong. The human part of us gets ill. And at the same time, the divine part of us is whole. How do I integrate that? That becomes the great mystery. That becomes the enthusiastic journey. I can feel this way physically, and I can know that there is a wholeness that resides, and I want more of that. But if I'm only stuck on this, that creates the stagnated story. And so the next thing then that breeds that she talked about is this big proverbial thing called shame. The title this morning about webs and boxes is about the way in which men and women handle shame. Brene Brown says that women, like a web, their shame kind of goes out and it sort of collects the things in their lives, be it people, be it objects, be it goals, and that all of those things are sort of embedded in this web, and they can manage their shame, because women are better at managing shame than men. They can manage it, but it's still very much a part of the intricacy of their life. Men are like boxes. The shame is in the box, and dare it try to get out. And I will fight tooth and nail to keep the shame in the box, isolated, hidden, untalked about, because it will create the appearance of weakness within me. Women will have it, might even use it a little bit, but it will still influence them and deflate their higher purpose, where men will isolate it for fear of being considered weak. And here's the amazing thing about shame. We all have it. So look to the person next to you. I acknowledge your shame. How about this? Shame on you. Right? So we all have it. And here's the next part, she says. We're all afraid to talk about it. Men or women, we're afraid to talk about it. And then the kicker is, the less you talk about it, the more of it you have. Any therapist in the house? Line up. So, we all have it. We're afraid to talk about it. The less we talk about it, the more of it we have. And so do you think then that shame is an energy that runs us? Do you think that shame then becomes a stumbling block on the road moving forward, the path moving forward, That prohibits us from understanding that, yes, this is the day that the law hath made, but ooh, that second part, and I will rejoice and be glad in it, I don't think so. And lastly, living authentically. So we tell the truth, we acknowledge shame, and then we strive to find a way to live authentically. I love the Chilean poet Pablo Neruda. You know, he said you can cut the flowers, but you can't deny the arrival of spring. So you can cut away all of the things that are your essential self, but you can't deny the essential self. And we are really good at sometimes trying to pluck away all of those things for fear of what other people will think. But I found a poem of his about dying slowly. And I posted it on Facebook, and it was like shared by hundreds of people. Not hundreds of people liked it, but hundreds of people shared it. And I went, ooh, that touched a nerve. Because you get lots of people liking things, but when they share it, you go, wow. And it said this: you start dying slowly if you do not travel, if you do not read, if you do not listen to the sounds of life, if you do not appreciate yourself, you start dying slowly. You start dying slowly when you kill your self-esteem, when you do not let others help you. You start dying slowly. You start dying slowly if you become a slave of your habits, walking every day on the same path. If you do not change your routine, if you do not wear different colors, or you do not speak to those you don't know, you start dying slowly. If you avoid to feel passion and their turbulent emotions, those which make your eyes glisten and your heart beat fast, you start dying slowly. If you do not change your life when you are not satisfied with your job or with your love, if you do not risk what is safe for the uncertain, you start dying slowly. If you do not go after a dream, if you do not allow yourself at least once in your lifetime to run away from sensible advice. I found this too. It said, you're not required to set yourself on fire in order to keep other people warm. So. We could continue to do this every week till one of us drops dead. And that would be fine. It would be the same pattern. But if we don't do something with regards to the message, then I guess my bigger question is, what's the point? Because all structure eventually crumbles and changes and metamorphosizes and transmogrifies itself. It all does. But rather than having that come to us through the big cosmic 2x4, wouldn't it be better if we were on that side of the evolution and we let the evolution then carry us, assist us, handhold us into the appropriate nature by which we are there to champion those who don't know how to champion themselves? to where we are there to love even when it feels hard to love, to feed even those who may know how to feed themselves but have forgotten, either physically or spiritually, to do the things that we think we cannot do, but most of all to understand what is mine to do, what is ours to do. The church of the 21st century must evolve. It must evolve from a message, personality-driven thing to a community, action-oriented vessel that moves and begins to influence and pick up and help and Samaritanize, which is a word I just made up, all of those who don't know how to do it for themselves, who may never walk into a physical building. It's not about preaching. It's not about converting. It's about picking up those who need to be picked up. It's about wiping the brow. It's about feeding. It's about doing the tangibles. That's what I'm interested in. That's one of the things we're going to talk about next week. And you need to be here. Because I think that we stand on the precipice of real value, importance, and shift and change. And I want to play in that arena. And I want to be vulnerable. And I want to be messy. And I want to do all of the things that it takes to break free from routine and find the power, the unexplored power that wants to speak and live and have its being through all of us, not just some of us, but all of us. How are you going to know what a pizza is until you put your teeth into it? How are you going to know what a rose is unless you go up to a rose and you smell it? How are you going to know what prosperity is until you give something of yours away unconditionally? How are you going to know what oneness means until you go up to the person that we have judged as immoral or unrighteous and seen the morality and the righteousness of who and what they are? By loving them, by dialoguing with them. How are we going to know true gratitude for what it is that we have unless we take somebody and we give them food and we give them shelter and we give them love, not from conversion, but because that's the humane thing to do? How are we going to know any of those things unless we are doing them? So I guess over the years I've become really good at putting sentence structure together and speaking. But I don't want to be known for that. And I don't want SLCA to be known for that. Because we deserve much more. So it is. Hi, I'm David Ault, and I simply want to say thanks. Thanks for taking the time to watch our broadcast here at Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta. We have a vision, and that vision is to reawaken all to their spiritual magnificence. And one of the ways that we are able to do that is through this very medium of broadcasting. So if you got anything out of this, if you felt in any way inspired, or if something spoke to you directly, then I extend an invitation to you to become a part of our family by donating. And there are many ways in order for you to be able to do that. One is to simply go to our website at slca.com, and there you will find all different kinds of prompts that will help you support what it is that we are doing here in Atlanta. One way is to become a pledger. That means that you decide on a monthly basis that you are going to help us with this vision. Another way is to donate through our management system called Fellowship One, another through PayPal, and another even easier way is on your cell phone. You can do what's called text to tithe, and that number is 404-796-7030. Again, thank you so much for your support, and I invite you to come back weekly to see what it is that we're up to. Blessings.